Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to do what is perhaps one of the most important segments in this 35mm shootout between the Canon 35mm f1.4 L2, the Canon 35mm f2 IS, the Sigma 35mm f1.4 Art, and then for good measure, we're throwing in the 45mm VC, that's f1.8 VC lens from Tamron, since I don't have the 35mm f1.8 on hand. Now, today we're going to be examining autofocus performance, and this is really, to me, it's one of the most important things for personal consideration. If I can't rely on a lens to accurately focus for me on a consistent basis, then I won't own it, because I don't want to feel like I might or might not get a shot depending upon the whim of the lens at the moment. And so it's very important to me, and I suspect important to you, to have consistently focusing lenses. To help to measure this, what I've done is I've gone through the same process that I detail in my written review of the 35L Mark II down below, where I've calibrated each one of these lenses to the body. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a three-dimensional target, and we're going to shoot at 5 feet, 10 feet, and then at 20 feet. And what I will do is I will first take a live view, manually focused, 10 times view, an image, and so that we have kind of a benchmark for each one of these lenses to see what accurate focus looks like. And then what we'll do is we will shoot 5 shots with the lens first defocused towards minimum focus, and then having to autofocus from that point, and then 5 shots with it focused out to infinity focus, and then having to come back to focus. And we'll see what gets the best kind of hit rate, work out the percentages, and report back to you at the end of this test which of these lenses is doing the best job of consistently hitting focus. Well, after looking at these pictures until my eyes are bloodshot and blurry, I've come to the following conclusions. Number one, I do want to just give you a few notes about the test itself. At the 20-foot distance, it's obviously the hardest to determine. Even magnifying the images to a pixel level, the focal range means that you're not zoomed in all that closely. And so some of these may get a little bit of a pass because it's harder to observe little shifts in focus. It would only be if something was major that it would stand out, and in reality, I really only saw one of those to any kind of degree at all. The Tamron had one where I could tell, even at that distance, that it had missed a bit and it was front focused. The Sigma had one that was a little off that I could tell, but nothing far. And so anyway, just note that we can determine these results with a little bit more accuracy at the 10-foot and then at the 5-foot distance. I made sure that the center focus point, which is highly accurate on the Canon 6D, was the one that was used, and always on the little kind of flower headdress thing on the top of the bear's head, because that gives very high contrast and was easy for all the lenses to lock onto. In the test, none of them had any kind of hunting or hesitation. They all very quickly got to their destination. Out of the bunch, the Tamron was the easiest to manual focus, which I already knew that already. It has the nicest focus ring and the longest focus throw. The Sigma was the worst, which I also already knew because it has a very, very tiny focus throw, almost half that of the Tamron. However, I found that there really wasn't a whole lot of difference between the lenses in terms of the sound that they made. In fact, the Tamron may have been slightly the quietest, and really there wasn't a whole lot of difference between the Canons or the Sigma when it came to their autofocus sounds. In terms of overall autofocus speed, I also didn't see a huge amount of difference, although I will say that the Tamron was the slowest of the bunch to focus. Again, not surprising, I found that in my review before. That being said, it also focuses down more closely than any of the others, and so as a result, it has to focus further when completely defocused. We'll start by taking a look at the results from the Tamron, and I actually reviewed those results first, and then I went back to double check them after having looked at the other results. And so at 20 feet, as I noted, when it was defocused down to, or focused towards infinity, there was it was basically perfect with all those as far as I could tell. When it was defocused down to minimum focus, there was one, as I noted previously, that was front focused a little bit. At 10 feet, I found that that's where the Tamron really seemed to suffer. And in fact, out of my first segment where they were focused out to infinity, and then coming back to focus, I only had one that I felt was properly focused, but all of those were front focused. And then when focused down to minimum focus, it got 4 out of 5 correctly hits, and the one that was off was front focused. That leads me to another potential issue here, and that is that the Tamron is the newest lens that I have in my possession, and I've been trying to do calibration on it, but haven't really felt that I've had it completely dialed in yet. And so the fact that it consistently is front focusing tells me that there may need to be some adjustment towards front focus in that. And so I'll continue to try to calibrate the results. Let me just say that if you're testing something like this, it's better to get a consistent poor result, if you're going to get a poor result, than it is to have results that are both front and back focus, which shows more of an inconsistency that you can't address through AFMA or adjusting it. Now, when I came in towards the close, the 5 foot distance, when focused at infinity, it nailed all of those. When it was focused down to minimum focus, it got 3 out of the 5 that were hit properly, 2 that were very slight mishits, and they were all front focused. Out of all of those results, however, all of them would come across as being acceptable. None of them were missed so badly that everything was out of focus. In fact, if you saw them at just a normal viewing level, you would say that they were accurately focused. It's only apparent at a pixel level that they weren't correctly focused. And so I would say that the Tamron needs a little bit more calibration, but those were the results that I found. I next looked at the Sigma 35mm f1.4 Art, and here were my findings. Out at 20 feet, I found when focused to infinity, there was one slight miss that seemed to be a bit of a back focus, but it was a moderate miss. When they were defocused to minimum, it nailed all of those. At the middle distance, at 10 feet, when it was focused towards infinity, there was one miss, so it got 4 out of 5 correct, and that one miss was front focused. When defocused down to minimum focus, it basically got 4 right and then a very mild misfocus on one that was also front focused. So then at the closest distance, 5 foot, I found that when I focused towards infinity, it missed 2 out of 5. So it got 3 correct. And one of those was fairly bad, but they were all front focused. From minimum focus, focusing out, there was just one that was missed, and it was also front focused. And so out of that, all of those misses, for the most part, were front focused. There was one that was back focused. I had more inconsistent results when using it in AF servo mode when comparing it to the 35L2 and shooting a live event in a gym. And so I have less confidence in the Sigma for that kind of setting when needing to use AF servo. But in this setting, it really didn't do very bad. And I think that most photographers would have been satisfied with the results. I next did the 35L Mark II, and so at the 20-foot distance, it was perfect. There was nothing that I could detect, and the images were very, very consistent. At the middle distance, I found that there was, when focused out to infinity, there was one miss that was front focused, and then when defocused to minimum focus, there was one that was missed, but it was a very, very mild, and it was also front focused. At the closest distance, at 5 foot, at defocus to infinity, it got them all right, and then there was one mild front focus when it was defocused to minimum. And so overall, as expected, the results were very, very good, very accurate from the 35L Mark II. Finally, the 35 IS, and I have to confess, I went into this with high expectations because I've been using this lens for some critical things for years, and I found it to be very consistently performing when it comes to its autofocus. I wasn't disappointed here either. At 20-foot distance, there was no miss that I could tell. In the middle, there was one very, very minor front focus, similar in that sense, similar to the 35L Mark II, but it had one very minor miss and then one a little bit more significant miss that the 35AS did not have. At minimum distance of 5 feet, the 35IS was flawless. And so overall, I have to say out of this test today that I have to give a slight win once again to the 35IS with one kind of significant caveat, and that is that out of these 4 lenses, it has the least demanding aperture or maximum aperture of f2. That's a full stop behind the Sigma and the 35L Mark II, and it's a third stop behind that of the Tamron. And so as a result, it has a little bit more depth of field to play with at each one of these focus distances, and in particularly at the longer focal distances when that smaller aperture comes into play. And so that means that while it performed exceptionally well, and if you're looking for a budget option that you can depend upon to focus accurately, I highly recommend the 35IS. That being said, I do think that the king, if you're going to shoot at f1.4, you need that very narrow depth of field. The king here is the 35L Mark II. So hopefully this has helped you out. This is a major consideration when it comes to these lenses. And to kind of further help you out, if you want to examine results for yourself, I'll throw a link down below to an article I'll put on my website that will include all of the samples that I took as a part of this. And if you want to, blow your eyes as I did going through them image by image at a pixel level, then you're welcome to knock yourself out. I'm Dustin Abbott. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Have a great day.